Retired soldier Ethan Walker moved to Colorado to escape the noise of war, searching for silence among the pines and snow-covered mountains. But one violent night changed everything. His loyal German shepherd, Storm, threw himself between Ethan and danger, taking a knife meant for his master. As Ethan rushed to save his wounded companion, he uncovered a long-buried secret tied to his family's darkest past, a hidden briefcase, a crime erased from history, and a powerful enemy determined to keep the truth buried forever. Ethan came home seeking peace, but now survival and justice are the only path forward. Please support us by subscribing to the channel. Rain clouds pressed low over Seabrook Bluff, Oregon, as if the sky itself were trying to hold the sea from rising. Ethan Walker stood alone on the back porch of the weather-beaten coastal house he had inherited, the wind flinging briny air against his face. He was a tall, white American man in his early 40s, shoulders broad from years of carrying more than just a soldier's pack. His hair, once dark, had begun to gather silver at the temples, a quiet reminder of wars that refused to stay in the desert where they began. A short beard sharpened the edges of his jaw, giving him a rugged, stubborn look, like a man who refused to quit even after the world had already decided his story was finished. His deep-set blue eyes held chapters of exhaustion, memories of sandstorms and explosions, and silent promises he had failed to keep. Seabrook Bluff had been his escape. A sanctuary carved into the edge of the Pacific, a place with more gulls than neighbors, more waves than memories. He had chosen this isolation willingly, believing that silence could be a remedy. But silence has its own voice, and sometimes it sounded too much like guilt. His only companion padded to his side. Storm, a 6-year-old German shepherd, tall and muscular but with a gentle slope to his ears when relaxed. His fur was a storm cloud mix of gray and black, thick enough that Ethan would jokingly say Storm carried half the Oregon forest in his coat after every walk. Storm had the intelligent, observant eyes of a protector, eyes that seemed to study Ethan's thoughts before they formed. The dog's past was a mystery. Found abandoned behind a grocery store, ribs sharp as knives, terrified of loud noises, signs that someone, somewhere, had not treated him kindly. Ethan had adopted him 2 years ago, recognizing that same haunted look staring back at him. They healed each other, piece by fragile piece. On this afternoon, the sea churned like a creature with too many secrets, waves crashing against the cliff below. The wind howled, rattling the windows, while the first raindrops tapped the porch roof like warning knuckles. The calm before the storm had teeth. "Looks like we're in for it, boy," Ethan murmured. Storm answered with a soft chuff and pressed his warm head into Ethan's palm, a reminder that he wasn't truly alone, even when he wanted to be. By nightfall, the storm arrived with a fury no man could reason with. The coastal house shuddered, its wooden frame groaning like an old warrior forced back into battle. Rain slashed sideways, battering everything with relentless rage. Thunder cracked overhead, a violent boom that sent a jolt racing through Ethan's body. In an instant, he wasn't home anymore. He was back in a burning alley in Kandahar. The smell of smoke, thick, someone shouting his name, commands blurring into panic. His heart hammered, breath shallow, vision tunneling. The walls were closing in, the lights too bright, the sound too loud, everything too much. Storm nudged him, first gently, then insistently. The dog crawled into Ethan's lap, pinning him to the sofa with 65 pounds of fur and loyalty. Ethan gripped the dog's shoulder fur, grounding himself in the real world, the world where the enemy was only the weather. Storm's steady heartbeat was a lifeline. "We're safe," Ethan whispered, more to himself than the dog. Morning came like a sigh. The storm retreated but left chaos as its calling card. Ethan stepped into the cold, sharp air, surveying broken branches scattered across the lawn and the mangled fence on the property's north side. But what hurt him most was the sight in the center of the yard. The massive Douglas fir tree, older than his grandfather's stories, was no longer standing proud. It had fallen, roots torn from the earth, exposing a dark crater beneath. "That tree was here before all of us," Ethan muttered, sadness catching in his throat. He laid a hand on its rough bark, feeling the weight of all the years it had guarded this land. Storm, however, wasn't interested in mourning. He leapt into the rain-soaked pit with surprising agility, nose working furiously. He growled softly, then barked twice, sharp, alert, insistent. "What have you got now?" Ethan slid down carefully, boots sinking into mud. Storm's paws scraped at the back of the pit, where the roots were tangled around a cold, angular shape. Ethan brushed away dirt, and his breath hitched. A rusted metal hatch, rectangular with the wheel valve handle, lay buried where no one should ever have found it. Ethan stared, the morning chill turning into a shiver of dread and curiosity intertwined. He felt Storm lean against him, tail twitching with nervous excitement. The dog had found something ancient, something hidden, something their family silence had guarded for decades, and Ethan, the man who had come here to escape his past, had just discovered a new one buried beneath his feet. Ethan stood in the muddy pit with the rusted hatch staring up at him like an unwanted truth. Storm stayed alert at his side, ears forward, muscles coiled with the excitement of discovery. Ethan brushed lingering soil from his palms, mind racing between fear and reluctant curiosity. He hadn't come here to find ghosts buried beneath family land. He only wanted to forget the ones already haunting him. But fate rarely cared for a man's intentions. Hours passed as he gathered tools and battled the fused metal wheel of the hatch. He sprayed penetrating oil into every rusted crevice, hammered around the edges to break the seal of time, and leaned in with the kind of stubborn strength only a Marine could possess. Finally, with a groaning shriek of metal, the wheel began to turn. When the hatch opened, a wave of cold air puffed up from the darkness below, dust and history breathing out like a warning. A steep concrete staircase led downward, vanishing into shadows older than he was. Storm whined at the top of the stairs. Ethan kneeled, hand on the dog's head. "Not this time, boy. I'll call you if I need backup." Storm didn't like it, but he stayed, pacing anxiously. Ethan descended, flashlight slicing through stale air. He found a compact bunker, bare concrete walls, a metal desk, and an old radio coated in dust. But what froze his breath was the olive-drab ammo box beneath the desk. He pried it open. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its lock rusted weak. He flipped through pages filled with neat handwriting, his grandfather Henry Walker's. Notes about weather and repairs faded into cryptic mentions of a joint asset and dangerous allies. He read the initials V and C, and the tone shifted from confidence to fear like a man sinking into regret. Ethan closed the journal quickly. He wasn't ready for more. Storm's bark from above jolted him. Ethan hurried up the stairs, flashlight beam dancing wildly. Storm stood rigid at the edge of the pit, gazing down the driveway. A silver sedan rolled toward the house, tires crunching gravel. Ethan tensed. He wasn't expecting anyone, and people didn't just casually visit a cliffside home miles away from town. The car parked and the driver stepped out, a young white woman in her early 30s. She was of average height, slender but strong-looking beneath her dark forest green jacket. Her skin was pale, her cheeks slightly flushed from the cold ocean air. Brown hair was tied neatly in a low ponytail, suggesting a practical nature. On her nose perched thin silver-rimmed glasses that gave her a keen, intelligent appearance. She gripped a leather satchel against her chest, knuckles tense as though she feared losing what it carried. "Ethan Walker," she called, voice clear but cautious. Ethan didn't reply yet. The military had trained him to measure strangers first. Her stance was steady, eyes alert, not reckless curiosity but purposeful determination. Storm trotted forward, not aggressively, but enough to warn. One wrong move. The woman stopped and gently lowered her gaze to Storm. "Good boy," she whispered, voice as softening with genuine fondness for animals. Storm's tail gave one suspicious twitch. Ethan stepped closer, shotgun nowhere in sight but his posture ready to defend. "Who are you?" She took a steadying breath. "My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm a historian, and I believe our grandfathers worked together." Claire opened her satchel and carefully removed a large, yellowed photograph sealed in a plastic sleeve. She held it out. Ethan hesitated, then took it. 3 young white men stood in front of this very house decades earlier, sunlight bright in their naive smiles. Ethan recognized his grandfather immediately, Henry Walker, broad-shouldered, proud, unaware of the sins that time would accuse him of. "That's my grandfather," Claire said, pointing to the man on the left. "Victor Mitchell. He was an engineer who worked on the government projects. He died when I was in college. My grandmother, she never talked about this photo." She pointed to the third man. "The one on the right is Charles Hale. His family is complicated, wealthy, very secretive." Ethan traced the photo with his thumb. The past had suddenly become real. Faces, not just hints in ink. Claire swallowed, her calm facade flickering into unease. The name Hale still has influence in this state, and there are old documents, contracts, that mention a shared investment between these 3 men, something tied to this land. Ethan's jaw tightened. His home, his one sanctuary, was becoming a battlefield he never asked for. "Why come now?" he asked. "Because the contract, whatever it is, expires in a month," she said. "Legally, when it does, everything connected to it passes to their heirs, that's you, and the Hale heir." The wind whistled sharply through the ruined fence, as if nature reacted to the truth. Storm let out a low growl, not at Claire, but at something deeper in the air, the scent of conflict stirring. Ethan looked back toward the muddy pit, toward the open hatch, whispering danger below. He had wanted a quiet life. Instead, the past had found him, and someone else would be coming for what lay beneath. Storm pressed closer, muscles tense. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Come inside," he said at last. Not an invitation, an acknowledgement of a fight already begun. The kitchen smelled faintly of salt and old timber as Ethan spread the weathered journal across the table, every page feeling like a sharp edge he wasn't prepared to grasp. Claire stood opposite him, hands braced on the wooden surface, her brows drawn tight behind her glasses as she tried to make sense of the cryptic entries. Storm lay close to Ethan's chair, head resting on his paws but eyes alert, watching every shift in their posture, every hint of tension in the air. Ethan silently reread the sections describing V and C, partners whose loyalty had decayed into fear. The words felt heavier now that one of their descendants had arrived to his doorstep with warnings of legal deadlines and hidden inheritances. Claire drew a breath, ready to speak, when Storm suddenly rose to his feet and released a low, rippling growl from deep in his chest. His fur bristled like dark thistles under moonlight. Ethan's muscles tightened instantly. He moved to the kitchen window, Storm's shoulder pressed to his leg like a tactical partner awaiting orders. At the end of the gravel drive, headlights cut through the sea mist, a sleek black SUV creeping forward, too polished, too deliberate to be a local. It stopped near the porch. 3 doors opened. The first man to step out was unmistakably the one in charge, Richard Hale. He appeared to be in his late 40s, tall, with angular shoulders and a posture that declared power had always been within reach for him. His skin was fair, but bronzed slightly, like someone whose golf courses were reserved for the elite. His dark hair was neatly styled, with only strategic hints of gray, and he wore a charcoal overcoat tailored so precisely it almost looked painted onto him. His clean-shaven jaw and narrow nose gave him a hawk-like intensity, and his cold blue eyes held no warmth, only entitlement sharpened into a blade. 2 other white men flanked him, both thick-necked and broad-chested with the weary aggression of professional enforcers. One had a shaved head and a jagged scar trailing from temple to cheek, his leather jacket stretched tight over weightlifter arms. The other was younger, but carried the same hardened demeanor, chewing gum like it was a threat. They didn't bother looking around. They knew why they were here. Claire stiffened beside Ethan. Storm snarled louder. Ethan stepped out onto the porch, deliberately leaving his shotgun inside. He wanted to communicate warning, not desperation. "Ethan Walker," Richard said without introduction, voice smooth but poisoned with condescension. "You're in possession of something that belongs to my family." Ethan kept his shoulders square. "I don't know what you're talking about." Richard's smile twisted upward without reaching his eyes. "Let's not waste each other's time. When the storm knocked down that old tree, it exposed more than roots. It exposed a debt that's due. I'm simply here to collect." Claire moved onto the porch, chin raised but fingers trembling slightly beside her thigh. Richard turned his gaze on her, and his expression sharpened with recognition. "Miss Mitchell, I assumed your family would send someone eventually, though I expected someone older." Claire's voice trembled with controlled anger. "What do you want?" Richard stepped forward just enough that Storm erupted, leaping to the porch edge, teeth bared, positioning himself between his humans and the threat. The sudden violence in Storm's stance startled even the enforcers. Richard froze mid-step, nostrils flaring with irritation. "Call off your dog," he ordered. "Storm isn't the one you need to worry about," Ethan said, voice low. Richard's expression hardened. His gaze shifted back to Ethan, every word becoming colder. "Your grandfather and mine built something together. Something valuable, very valuable. And while the world believes it was my family who squandered it, I assure you, we never lost track of our inheritance. We just waited for the right moment." He leaned in slightly, his breath steady, confident. "Now is that moment." Storm growled again, the kind of growl that promised violence, muscles trembling with the desire to protect. The enforcers were momentarily less sure, glancing down at the dog's exposed fangs and calculating the cost of getting past him. Richard lifted a gloved hand, an order to stand down, but his glare sharpened to razor-thin disdain. "This isn't finished," he told Ethan. "You can cooperate and remain standing, or I can bring a team next time who won't mind bleeding." He brushed imaginary dust from his coat sleeve as though Ethan's presence alone had dirtied it. "Enjoy the view while it's still yours." With a curt flick of his wrist, he turned on his heel. Storm growled until the SUV disappeared back into the mist. Only once silence returned did Ethan let out the breath trapped in his chest. Claire wrapped her arms tightly around herself. "They know everything," she whispered, "more than we do." Ethan rested a hand on Storm's head, grounding himself in the steady strength there. The porch, once his safe place, now felt like a battlefield's edge. He stared toward the pit in his yard, toward the hatch yawning into darkness, and a truth formed in his chest like a knot tightening. If he didn't uncover what his grandfather had buried, Richard Hale would. Storm pressed into his leg, as if sensing Ethan's resolve hardening. The fight wasn't coming. It had already begun. Night tightened over Seabrook Bluff like a dark fist, squeezing silence from every corner of the house. Yet inside, Ethan and Claire felt anything but silent. They sat at the kitchen table, the leather-bound journal spread open under the warm glow of a single lamp. Storm lay close, chin on his paws but eyes unwavering, watching the door as though Richard Hale might materialize from the shadows. Ethan tapped the margin of a page where Henry Walker's handwriting shifted from simple notes to hurried scribbles, numbers, arrows, and cryptic directional letters. These markings had bothered him from the moment he discovered them, feeling intentional and urgent. Claire leaned forward, glasses glinting as she studied the strange codes. 24N8E, 6S1W, 12W, 5N. "They look like measurements," she murmured. "But to what?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, tension rolling beneath his skin like static. His instincts, sharpened by years of tactical thinking, told him these were coordinates. He worked with angles, construction, structural planning. "Maybe it's about the bunker itself, not the land around it." Claire nodded, excitement flickering through her fear. "Measurements inside a limited grid, the bunker walls." She scribbled a rough layout of the underground room on a sheet of Ethan's stationery. Storm lifted his head, ears twitching as he sensed their urgency. Ethan traced each series of numbers, connecting them with practiced precision. 1 point along the north wall, 8 feet up. Another point low on the south side, and the final point from the west wall inward. At first, the points seemed random, but when Claire drew lines to intersect them, the solution emerged: a single, precise location. A spot halfway along the west wall, around 5 feet high, a place so plain it promised secrets. Ethan stood abruptly, chair legs scraping on the wood floor. "We have to go down there now." Claire hesitated. "Richard could come back. That's exactly why we can't wait." Storm rose beside Ethan, stretching his long frame, tail raised high, ready to work. Claire grabbed 2 flashlights from her satchel and followed them into the cold night wind. The muddy pit yawned beneath the stars, the hatch gaping like a wound. Ethan climbed down first, searching every shadow with disciplined suspicion. The flashlight beam cut across concrete walls scarred by decades of silence. Claire descended behind him, careful but resolute. Storm waited at the top, whining anxiously. He did not like his human out of sight. Ethan reached the west wall and pressed his palm against the cold surface. It felt like fate had poured concrete over whatever Henry Walker wanted to hide forever. With jaw clenched, Ethan retrieved a heavy sledgehammer from the corner where he'd left tools earlier. He planted his feet the way training had drilled into bone memory. First swing, a thunderous crack. Concrete dust floated like ghostly snow. Second swing, a fracture crawled outward like lightning trapped in stone. Storm barked from above, alarmed by the violence. "It's okay, buddy," Ethan called up between breaths, voice strained. "Stay sharp." Claire held the flashlight steady, her face pale but determined. "Keep going, it's giving way." Third swing. The wall caved inward with a hollow, splintering crunch. The inner cavity exhaled stale, trapped air mixed with the faint chemical scent of old preservation treatments. Ethan cleared debris with bare hands, ignoring sharp edges that scraped his knuckles. His pulse hammered. He reached in, fingers brushing something solid. Heavy, cold, rectangular. He pulled out a weatherproof briefcase, dark brown leather hardened with age, brass latches tarnished but intact. It was surprisingly weighty. Claire gasped softly. The bunker suddenly felt smaller, the air charged, like they had just woken something that should have been left sleeping. Ethan set the case onto the desk, his fingertips trembling. "Whatever this is, my grandfather thought it was worth burying behind concrete." Claire swallowed hard. Or worth protecting from someone. Before they could open it, Storm's bark erupted, sharp, furious, echoing down the stairs like a warning siren. Ethan snapped the flashlight toward the pit entrance. Storm stood there rigid, fur bristled, teeth bared, not at the night, but at something approaching. Tires crunched on gravel. Headlights swept across the collapsed fence. Another vehicle. Another threat. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper that barely held together. "He's back." Ethan gently pushed the briefcase into Claire's arms, eyes narrowing into the calm focus of a soldier preparing for a new war. Storm growled deep enough to shake the air. Richard Hale wasn't going to let the past stay buried, and the night was far from over. Storm's furious barks echoed through the bunker like alarms detonating in the dark, each one sharp enough to shred any hope that Richard Hale had simply given up. Ethan darted up the concrete stairs, Claire clutching the heavy briefcase to her chest as she scrambled behind him. They emerged into the night, wind whipping salt and fear into their faces. Storm stood at the edge of the pit, his entire body locked in a protective stance. Another set of headlights cut across the ruined yard. The black SUV again, this time stopping much closer. The back door opened first. Richard Hale stepped out, his polished shoes sinking into wet dirt, overcoat fluttering like a raven's wings in the night wind. But he wasn't alone. Two more men climbed out after him, different from the last pair. Bigger, more prepared. The first was a bald white man in his late 30s, with a square jaw and a crooked nose that hinted at past fights lost and won. The muscles in his neck bulged against the collar of a black tactical jacket. The second was slightly older, late 40s, with a thick brown beard cropped short and eyes like cold river stones. A deep scar curved from his ear to the edge of his lip, twisting his neutral expression into a permanent sneer. Both men walked as if danger was their native language. Richard smiled as though he were greeting old neighbors. "I told you this wasn't finished." Claire's arms tightened around the briefcase instinctively. Storm moved to stand between her and the threat, a low growl vibrating against the ground. Richard noticed. "A very impressive animal," he said, voice dripping with irritation. "But he's standing in the way of something far bigger than loyalty." He snapped his fingers. The bald enforcer moved toward the bunker's opening to enter, the fastest route to the prize. Ethan stepped forward, blocking him with his body. "Enough," he warned. His fists were clenched but empty. He hadn't grabbed the shotgun. The situation had escalated too fast. "Walk away now while you can." Richard gave a soft laugh like he was bored. He nodded slightly. The bearded man moved, a blur of force. His boot slammed into Ethan's ribs, sending him to the ground, breath knocked from his lungs. Claire screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Richard's voice sliced through the chaos. "Take the case." Storm launched himself like a missile fired from fury itself. His body collided with the bearded man hard enough to topple them both. Beast and assailant rolled across the mud. Storm's teeth bared inches from the man's throat. "Get the dog off him!" the bald man shouted. A glint of metal flashed in the bearded man's hand. A knife. Claire cried out. "Storm! No!" Too late. The blade jabbed in a desperate arc. Storm yelped, a sound that carved straight through Ethan's chest. The dog stumbled backward, blood darkening his fur, his powerful legs giving way beneath him. For a moment, the world froze. Wind suspended, time held hostage by horror. Then everything crashed back. Ethan dragged himself up despite pain ripping through his ribs. He shoved Claire behind him. Each heartbeat felt like a grenade. Richard stepped forward casually, eyes gleaming with victory. "Pick up the briefcase," he ordered his men. "We're done here." But sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Richard's head snapped up, surprise flashing into rage. "Who did you call?" Ethan managed a grim half-smile through clenched teeth. "A friend." Red and blue lights split the night as a sheriff's cruiser skidded onto the lane. Sheriff Tom Bradley, a broad-shouldered white man in his mid-40s with a trimmed mustache and a cop's eternal suspicion carved into sharp hazel eyes, stepped out. His hand hovered over his holster, badge gleaming under headlights. He scanned the scene. Ethan injured, Claire terrified, Storm bleeding, strangers with weapons drawn. His voice boomed like a hammer. "Drop everything and step away." The bearded man dropped his knife instantly. Storm still snarling weakly at his feet. Richard cursed under his breath but motioned his men to back down. He knew the law and how to temporarily respect it. "This isn't over," Richard spat, retreating to the SUV as the sheriff advanced. The enforcers followed, eyes burning revenge into memory. Tires spat mud as they sped away into the dark. Sheriff Bradley rushed forward. "Ethan, talk to me." Ethan ignored his own pain, already cradling Storm's trembling frame. Blood soaked his hands. The dog's breath came in shallow, rapid gasps. "We need a vet," Ethan panted. Claire's face streaked with tears. "Now!" Sheriff Bradley nodded sharply. "Get in the passenger seat. I'll drive." Ethan lifted Storm gently into his arms, the weight that had saved his life now fragile as a child. Storm whimpered but did not resist. He trusted Ethan to get him home. As the cruiser sped toward the emergency animal hospital, Ethan kept whispering, "Stay with me, boy. Just stay with me." Storm's eyes fluttered, but they stayed open. The fight wasn't over. They had survived the night. But the real battle, for the truth, for justice, for Storm's life, had only just begun. When life feels heavy and the world turns dark, sometimes God sends his miracles on 4 paws. a loyal friend who refuses to let us give up. Storm's courage reminds us that love, faith, and the quiet protection of God still walk beside us every day. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more tales of hope. May God bless you and your family with strength, healing, and a guardian angel, whether they have wings or a wagging tail.